Hi, this is Privateer Station, and this morning we're bringing you day 388 of Russian invasion into Ukraine, with former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Olexiy Arestovych, Lieutenant Colonel, and Mark Feygin, Russian opposition politician. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. It is Saturday, March 18th. Time is 1 minute past 10 in Moscow, 1 minute past 9 in Kiev. We are doing our usual stream, day 388, on our channel with Olexiy Arestovych. Glad to see you, Olexiy. Good evening, Mark. Good evening, everybody. Yesterday it was specifically good. We'll discuss that. We have almost 71,000 starting with us. Right, the 25th frame. Share links, click the like buttons, do not forget that. Of course, subscribe if you have not done that yet to Feygin Live, Olexiy Arestovych, and to the Privateer Station if you have not done that and you are watching that or listening to that in English. Alright, so let's start with the main topic. I think it's the right thing to do if we start with an order. Why did you sign off on the order? The world fell apart. Did it or it didn't? It will never be the same, I mean, Mark. Tell us more. Why? Well, it crumbled twice. On the 24th of February 2022, when Putin started this pointless war, and yesterday, what March was it? 17th of March? Yes, 17th of March 23, when an order for his arrest was issued. Many things were said, don't want to repeat that, but we all understand that this is a sentencing personally for Putin. It started when he was acknowledged to be a suspect in the case of MH17, to understand that it's not just a red line, it's a black mark. And now, as in that joke about the pirates, he also got a rainbow mark. International court is not even International Court of United Nations, where one could save some face, you're a serious criminal. The whole UN court is looking at you. Hague is for real, down-to-earth, ugly criminals. Right, Bashar, the president of Sudan, he's hiding in his own country. So yeah, as we talked about the other joke earlier, to fuck down to, from the level of the president of a great world power, down to the low-level criminal who is being wanted for kidnapping. Yeah, the 8th article of Roman statute. Yeah, that's a pretty long fall. So what's important for us? Besides the smiles and the moral repercussions, we're curious about the consequences. So there will be consequences, personally, to Putin. Our Ukraine Defense Council made a condition about a year ago that we're not talking to Putin in any case. And now it is officially joined by how many countries ratified that Roman statute? 121. All right. In Europe, everybody except Russia and Belarus. Yeah, and Ukraine signed but didn't ratify. United States didn't sign that one. But still, you're now a world pariah. Understandably why it was done now. The hit was timely when it became known that Xi Jinping is flying to Moscow. You think that's connected, Olexiy? Oh, absolutely. That's one of the attack lines. And now Xi is in a very difficult position because in some capacity it became rather worthless, that visit. And it became toxic for China because you know, on the East, they do pay a lot of attention to saving face, and now you have to shake hand with a person who is considered by half the world to be a kidnapper. And those who haven't even signed that, like United States, came out, Biden said that, yeah, he did violate everything. He's a war criminal. Scholz and the others came out also and said the same. So now you're supposed to be there and shake hands with the kidnapper? There is already an order out. And that's not even counting the other war crimes. That's not even Al Capone, who was arrested for not paying taxes. This is kidnapping. And the visit is being marginalized because it becomes much harder to announce a world friendship of China with a criminal who is just under arrest order. It is not entirely impossible, but this is a much more difficult task. I don't think China will be able to change their agenda in the remaining 3 days to the visit. But in reality, they will be thinking a lot about what can they do or should they do with the Russia in that format. Because all their attempts was basically to maintain Putin in power as the Chinese puppet. Because he was giving them any concession they asked, and they actually liked it. So this arrest order basically broke the strategic policy of China in regards to Russia. Because the key point in this politics approach was retaining Putin in power as a very comfortable figure for China, from whom they can get any concession, technology, energy, anything. Now China needs to change the strategy towards Russia because Putin is basically an inmate that is temporarily not in jail. And of course, the question of preserving him in power is either impossible or is possible in a very marginalized scenario where the whole Russian Federation turns into a whole North Korea entirely dependent on China, and it's not entirely clear if China would even appreciate that. So with one action, the West put a big dot in the resume of Putin and beheaded Putin's regime for the future. And also broke Chinese strategy that was hopeful to make peace with Putin to make sure that that person still stays in power. This is what happens when adult players come to play. Imagine just one motion, not even the United Nations level, not even anything of that caliber, just a criminal court with a Polish judge comes out and says, here's an order. And China needs to change the whole strategy now in regards to Russia, to their efforts in peacemaking, and to the West. And this is a very serious sign to Russian elites. If there is an order for arrest of Putin, imagine what will happen to you guys. But they are basically being offered an option. This is unspoken continuation of Biden's speech and unspoken continuation of Arestovych and Feygin, who've been explaining for the last year that, guys, if you put on one side of the weights yourselves, your families, your properties, your lovers, your wives, your children, your futures, and on the other, a war criminal who is acknowledged by the international community as a war criminal. So all you need to do is literally find a way to arrest him and deliver him to justice. And there is no immunity of a leader of a country. There is no immunity that works in this case as the United Nations Security Council member. And by the way, the article itself that he is accused of kidnapping, it's also not exactly something to brag about. And also, remembering all these weird videos of Putin kissing bellies of children in different meetings. So that's not exactly a good visual. Now I think that we could cut to Robert White end titles in the movie, just like in that meme. So, Olexiy, do you think the Chinese mission completely collapses, or would they have some continuation? What? Whom to negotiate with? Well, I don't know. Well, imagine he calls on the 20th to Zelensky on the video. What would they talk about? Well, our countries have other agenda. Besides Putin, we do have to discuss our relations, China-Ukraine relations. Of course, war will be a factor in this, but there are other things we can talk about. And if China will now try to suggest immediate negotiations with Russia, we might pose a question, whom with? I'm just fantasizing here, but Are you suggesting that we talk to a kidnapper of our children? What about it? All right, then let's go back to the goal of China. What was their hope? Were they hoping to come as a peacemaker here? We made help to make peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and will probably make peace between these two and capitalize on that. But if there is no perspective, well, we know part of the Chinese suggestions, and Americans already criticized that, Mark. They did mention that Chinese strategy, part of that Chinese offer was ceasefire and keeping the occupied territories under Russia, which is against the Charter of United Nations, and it's already criticized widely. So it appears that China had that in mind, but now the only agenda remaining is maybe dual-sided economic relations, but even that is hanging in the air now. Do you think it may change, Olexiy, the mission from peacemaking to just a usual, somewhat relationship visit? Or like a union, China-Russia? Do you think they may even come out and say we are giving arms to Moscow? That is very unlikely, Mark, because you're siding with a criminal, with the crimes that have no expiration date. China was warned quite a few times about sanctions that they may face. So if they go in that direction, they start immediate Cold War with all the consequences and probability of switching and becoming a hot war as well. And now China, with 86% dependent on exports, how long do you think it'll exist after that in its current state? I don't know, but some people think that China may actually is more stable than other people believe. Well, I don't think that China will be wanting to check that theory, Mark. And I did talk to some people in the know, in the higher levels of echelon in China, and there's basically a loud howl pervading the halls of their capital, appealing to Xi to not to not strike any accord with Putin. And it's not low-level party members; it's the top, it's the leadership of the party, trying to address him to say no, do not strike any agreement with Putin. And they do have a lot of economic issues. They have, I forgot the number, a couple $1 trillion in debt, a huge disparity between rich shores and poor inlands, Taiwan, Uyghurs, and other consequences of COVID policies. So, right, one more thing they really want is another conflict. Plus, again, support of Moscow, you're basically refusing the concept of territorial integrity of Ukraine. So you're creating a precedent with your own hands to review borders in the modern world in an armed way. There are a lot of people around China who would want to jump on a bandwagon eventually. The very little is very minimal. It's Taiwan, right? There are some islands. There's India and China territorial conflict on the border. Occupied Tibet in 1950s. So I think they're smart and logical people enough to not go into that adventure. What I cannot exclude is that they might strike a couple contracts to supply dual-use goods and maybe some gray schemas, but in the open, I don't believe China will start supplying arms to Russia. It'll be a suicide for China, and I don't see them doing that. Most likely. All right, at least in the very near future, we'll be able to gauge that and to gauge what Xi Jinping will choose and his leadership. Which path will they go? And I also am of a point of view, I voiced it in public already, that this decision might be related to his visit, because that could have been announced on the 25th, on the 27th. What would have changed? Mark, they could have announced that during Xi Jinping's visit. That would have been an even more brutal version. So for now, they actually gave him a few days to react, because if they were real rough, they could have announced it during his visit with Putin. That would have been very uncomfortable. Right now, China has time to at least shift the goals and purposes of the visit and restructure it a little. All right, we have almost 202,000 watching us, 62,000 click the like button. Thank you those for joining us. Do not forget to click the like button. We've been live for only about 12 minutes. Don't forget that other people also want to watch the stream, so let's take a look at the map, what's happening there. On the front, the last 2 days were marked with a huge number of shellings. I was thinking that if I would be naming all the places hit, that would take easily 10 minutes of our stream. Just for an example, Kherson in the last 24 hours got shelled 76 times. Not even counting Donetsk, Lugansk, Kharkov, where there are casualties among civilians and wounded. And also 16 Shaheds UAVs tried to attack us last night. Most of them were shot down. Several successfully hit their targets. So if you look at the map, in Zaporozhye there is a little bit of tactical motion. There is some motion near Vuhledar, near Marinka, and to the north of Avdiivka, and of course Bakhmut and Solidar are the hottest points of contention, and evil tongues on Russian side are saying that in the north and in the south of Bakhmut they've been pushed back a little bit. And now we start hearing tunes in their forums that if that will continue in that way, then perspective of capturing Bakhmut is unclear. We're lacking this, we don't have enough of that. And now Russians are screaming about silly generals, and usually the conversations about stupid generals is reflection of things being more difficult on the front. So yeah, that stone flower is not coming out like in that fairy tale and anecdote. In the north, they also can't really continue pushing. They still are near Vasykovka and Razdolovka. If you look to the north, Korennaya, Yampol, Liman, very slow, grinding fights. They're basically stuck in that forested area, hills and forests. They are trying to post videos and show pictures of them taking Ukrainian trenches, but we understand that this is, in most cases, the only video shot at several angles, and they're just trying to hype it up. Attempts to storm Makiyevka in the very north of what you're showing on the map also don't work, and attempts to move towards Kupiansk, they just basically have frozen near Dorechne and that area. Very small tactical actions, if to describe that activity. They cannot even be called storming or attacking. They are refitting and rotating their troops. We factually can say that in Russia they have a new wave of mobilization with giving documents to conscripts and saying that, hey, you are invited now to join that. And they're not ready to bring it up in the open because public opinion really doesn't want that to happen. But they are doing it under the radar, and there were numbers above 150,000 that they want to add to their army. But for those who had a few seconds to be afraid, just as a reminder, they have a capacity to train only 100,000 at a time, together with Belarus, and they also need weapons and lower rank officers to lead, to go anywhere, and 2-3 months of training, because that basically takes them to June, July time frame. And of course they can cut the preparation time, but then whatever you throw in the front is much more ill prepared, and then it would only be 100,000 and nothing to really arm them with, and nobody to lead them, especially sergeants. Of course, they might mobilize some, but their commanders' quality are at best very varying from the standard. And also, if we're looking at the time frame, we're looking at summer, they really don't have enough time to stop our offensive, our counteroffensive. Even with that, they just run out of time trying to stop us. And since that mobilization will continue, will take at least a month, maybe even more, that hidden effort. So this activity is rather hopeless and likely will be used not to attack Ukraine, but to try to stop our counteroffensive at best. Because all Russian agenda on the front, except for stupid attempts to take Kremenaya, Kupiansk, and Bakhmut, this is turning now into strategic defense lines, especially on the south. All right, 226,000 are with us. 77,000. Click the like button. Guys, if you don't click us up to 100,000, I'll slowly walk out of the frame. We're almost. Come on, guys, it's 220, only 100k likes needed. You can do it. It'll help this stream to get in the trends and recommended and get more eyeballs on this. All right, next question about the grain deal. I don't know what are the reasons behind Moscow's position. Maybe you can elaborate on this intrigue. They said they will extend it for 60 days. Ukraine said that we're eager to do it for 120 days more. For me, it doesn't matter, both of them. No, Mark, no, there is a difference. Oh, tell us more. Well, they expect our counteroffensive to start within the next 60 days. And what then? Well, they need these negotiations as another tribune to scream about, hey, if they don't stop this counteroffensive, we will not continue the grain deal. As if Olexiy counteroffensive will stop because of the deal? No, it won't. Of course it won't, but it's at least some lever. You know, it won't help, right? But they need to do something, so that's the story. They're hopeful that at about that time frame, they will be hit pretty hard on the front, and they will need to scream and to promise to break something. And what can they break? Well, in this case, they'll be able to break the grain deal. They can actually break it anytime, but Turks indeed want to have paper here. That's why. Because, see, we agreed to be okay for 60 days. But I think Turks in their version wrote 120. So it's interesting. It's interesting how that will unfold, and I don't think anything Olexiy will help them to scream. Right, it won't, but they got to do something, right? They have to go through some motions and to send their diplomats somewhere and to pretend to play stuff or cosplay that. All right, there is some logic in this. I'm just thinking personally that some people were considering maybe that's related to elections in Turkey, which will be over by day 60 of that contract extension. I don't know if that'll help Erdogan, but anyway. By the way, it might be that angle too, Mark, as a factor, because if Erdogan is not elected, they might try to re-establish the deal on new conditions, on new terms. But if he will be elected, then perhaps they can go back to the table and add some other or try to add some other conditions to it. So that's just the level of diplomacy. The Russian diplomacy now that they are trying to blackmail in supplying food to Africa. What basically is being stated is that let's put millions of people at risk of hunger because we have political aspirations to things changing on the front and in Turkey. Is it responsible politics? A responsible world player? No, right? Even USSR, that people have accused of a lot of things, would have never done such politics. As the old veterans of Cold War in America say, you can call USSR the Empire of Evil 3 times, but at least there were people who lived through the Second World War there and who did not want the repetition of that, and they were conducting responsible politics in this regard. These guys have not, and just the statements of their last several days. Remember, 8 minutes for our missile to hit the capital that might try to arrest Putin. And now the next one is that grain agenda to perhaps put millions of people in hunger, in the danger of hunger. What else? What did Medvedev tweet in his pork, Ukrainian something with Biden. I'll quote here, Olexiy. Excuse me, I'm quoting his tweet. Why am I doing that? Is because people always turn to me saying, "Why are you calling him an idiot and a dumb F?" Because here's why. Idiots in Europe tried to arrest an alien. I don't know his meaning, a movie, but whatever. On the 21st of March, they will arrest their own. That's Trump, right? We'll talk about that later. Bring your country back, Americans, to arms, destroy the tyranny of Washington, and send to the dump yard of history the corrupt gang of pork Ukrainian files, father and son Bidens. And he added, for whatever reason, MAGA at the end. And at the bottom he ended, the post is placed by the request of candidate in the president of United States, Colonel Daniel Theodore Trump. That's beyond Olexiy. And that creature was a president in Russia since 2008 to 2012. And that's the power we're dealing with. We have to. Mark, some of them are openly insane, yes. An attempt of Russian senator to capture Constantinople. I don't think he's a senator, right? He's an official figure, though. He used to be. Anyway, a note from the public Russian media that Constantinople needs to be captured, while Turkey has issues, and the formula is issues after the earthquake. Already, responded to that. Bagdasarov, go, try. Try to take your raft to Turkish shores. We'll see how far will you fare. We'll buy beer and popcorn. So, and then be surprised that people are treating them as rabid dogs, actually more like rabid monkeys. No surprise there, right? How would they say that? Turkey was wavering about accepting Sweden and Finland to NATO, but I hear more and more affirmations that likely will be okay. Finland, I think it's already decided, Olexiy. And Sweden, do you think it's still open? I think even adding Sweden to NATO is awesome because they have a mobilization reserve of 250,000. They have almost 1,000 kilometers border with Russian Federation, plus the shoreline, another 30 kilometers of Finnish Strait, and it's fully controlled by NATO. So, right, Putin's result of trying to push NATO back to the borders of 1997. And if they think that Russian rhetoric is not a fact, I would say in all the serious analytics, Russian rhetoric is being considered. Timothy Snyder, when he was making statements about Russia, he actually, as an invited expert when he testified in the United Nations, he is stating that Russian politics is a politics of genocide of surrounding nations. And I was, somewhere at that time, was writing a post which was retweeted a ton of times. I think people appreciated that formulation that Russian ideology is the one that makes genocide an official politics. So, and that's everything they do. They try to push NATO back. NATO is expanding. They try to exploit the problem of refugees from Africa. Now there are news from Europe that many European countries are strengthening their laws. They don't want to accept anymore. They're adding barriers and limits. Italy is punishing for 30 years those who provide the ferrying services to illegal immigrants. Other countries stating that illegal immigration is a cause for immediate deportation and an attempt to exploit their humanistic values and things that they thought are weak sides of Europe is failing now. And the Russian point was very weird in this case. They officially made a good face, but their practices were utterly barbaric. And Europe was confused for a while. How can you be speaking civilized words, but in practice, how do you plan in that same time to blow up Chernogoria parliament so they don't join NATO? And now, with their idiotic rhetoric, they actually finished the picture of actively insane. And now they're being treated accordingly with a sanitar border and taking certain measures against them by issuing the court order and addressing the countries that had some complementary relations. But Austria, Serbia, and Hungary, they're all finding themselves in a very difficult position because you have to acknowledge that you are friendly with whom? With a maniac? With the criminally insane? So that's what they made. That's the mistake the Russians, the Putin's regime made. If they continued with a civilized rhetoric, if they were appealing still to Pushkin and Dostoevsky and their contribution to the Second World War, that would have been much easier, and their opponents in Europe would have been much harder for those to try to proceed with sanctions. And even with their current war crimes in Bucha and kidnappings in Mariupol and all, political rhetoric would still be somewhat of a barrier for many countries to cross over. But yeah, they failed to hold the face, and now they're presenting themselves uncivilized, not even as thugs. I don't want to offend thugs by comparison. Yeah, even thugs have some ethics. These guys don't. But we do understand that if there is an order in the name of Putin, who can feel themselves in Russian elites, who can feel themselves safe? They thought that they will be fighting in a different mode. There will always be an untouchable elite that will send people to die on the front, and they will remain untouchable and in power. But here's Europe coming back and hitting them right at that elite head, at the top of it. So their hopes are crumbling. I would even say here, in some defense of thugs, I did work with some of those in the 90s defending criminal cases and all. They had some ethics. We're not hurting, we're killing for mistakes, but we don't never touch the young ones, as they said. So these guys in Kremlin, they don't care. They have no moral qualms. And by the way, we have 120,000 likes. They heard you, Olexiy. So we've been, 30 minutes live? 31-minute live? Let's talk about Putin's visit to Crimea. I want you to address that in the light of the 16th of March, of the meeting with the Russian Chamber of Industrialists. And today they announced that he has visited Crimea already, so post factum. There were no mass gatherings. The only thing that was brought up is that he visited the School of Arts. Right, arts is the only thing that should be on his mind right now. And he met with certain Razvozhaev, a governor of Sevastopol area. So very modest, even compared with last year when they had some celebrations and he visited in March and there were things happening. Today is the 9th year of Russian annexation of Crimea. Next year will be 10th, and I don't think they'll probably be celebrating the 10th at all. So I think that'll be the end of the story. But do you think that signifies that he's afraid that some HIMARS or drone will shell his location? He understands that he still needs to pacify people, to show that, see, I'm still visiting, despite that all your beaches are spiked with trenches and fortifications now, and that Ukraine may start Ukraine activists may start taking out the cigarette butts on your heads, so-called. Don't be afraid, I'm still here. What's the message? Well, we understand why, right? It generally to not come would have been somewhat a different signal. But he doesn't have enough in him to come and do any public meeting because his guards probably gauging the risks properly, so they did an activity with a very limited number of participants, small group, a couple of photographers from Kremlin press pool, and some obscure school of arts, which they're not even naming, so there's no geographical connection, nothing in the open air, no videos with that. Idiots, right? They could have said that he's sick or he's preparing for a visit by Xi Jinping and he's working with documents, record a proper message to the citizens of Crimea, and they just to pacify them in the open and say, hey, I'm with you. But on the other hand, he's going there to open the School of Arts, but there are no public statements at all. Exactly, there are no public statements. And this used to be one of the main Russian holidays for the last few years. It's his crown jewel acquisition. It was always a big deal. All these, dressed up clowns dancing as Crimea Russian seamen. But in the political decision-making, Mark, any polar decision is better than the medium decision. So he had to either go there fully in the open with a full geographic connection, maybe even risk his life and say that, hey, I'm not even afraid of HIMARS. So then everybody gets that the leader got balls and he's as strong as, let's say, Zelensky, who visited Bakhmut and other places on the front, and see ours is not afraid more. Or to not go, other option would be to not go at all. Record a proper message, but then say, you understand that we're facing a lot of issues, NATO is creeping up, Chinese contacts are coming to visit. I'm staying in Moscow working with documents, but I remember you and I need to come. And I needed to record something for you. Of course, the leader doesn't have to go to things like that. But there was an action, a tiny as the mosquito penis, a visit to open a School of Arts, right? No idea what is that for. Mark, you've been vice mayor of a city. What was needed to send you to open a School of Art? That would be awkward, even in your city, right? It was awkward. I wouldn't even have been sent to that. Me and art are not exactly a good match. Okay, your colleague, who is more in charge of art, some department of education, right? At least there would be some connection, some logic behind that. Or, for example, the school burnt as a result of something and then now it's being rebuilt and restored and maybe a mayor or vice mayor could come. But just an opening of an art school that was built according to plan, it's not even a mayoral level. Maybe representatives of the Department of Education, some head of regional, of local administration will be there, but that's about it. So even for mayor, it's questionable. You know, if mayor is coming, there's got to be kids in bows, moms all dressed up, a lot of video. You know, mayor is united with people. And here, a whole president, he comes to the School of Arts, and there are no arts and no people in it. Right, Mark? A president of the warring country at war, who has an order on his name, he didn't find anything better to go and open an art school? This is a very good signal for us, I think. Between the problematic of international public opinion, the pressure and the circumstances they created and other circumstances that are created for them now, they lost adequacy of decision-making, or they're losing it now. However you look at that decision, this is an inadequate decision. It just isn't. And this is good. I will take that. And it's inadequate not even in the style of the madman, but in the style of just trying to do something proper and failing to do that. All he needed to make is a 3-minute appeal to people living in Crimea and tell them, we understand that you are digging trenches there, we are with you, we'll have regional defense group, we'll be defending Crimea with anything, you don't have to be afraid of any stuff, we'll use everything to defend Crimea, so we'll always protect you and be with you, and we'll provide humanitarian aid, and we'll make sure that Crimean bridge will not be ever destroyed. The joint group of air and navy forces are defending it. We just recently shot even United States UAV, and we can shoot down everything that will look sideways towards Crimea. But no. And very quietly creeping out to see a school of arts and then running away. So, and that's the fun part. That's the thought we're guiding our viewers to. What if there are no public statements in the media to protect and defend it and retain it as part of Russia? What does it mean? It probably means that he is not ready to take that responsibility on his shoulders. They are preparing for defense already, and wherever there is defense, of course, there is an eventuality, one of them, that Crimea is being forfeited to Ukraine. So once again, that same logical chain. Crimea is a diamond in his crown. It's one of the crown jewels as a result of his 20 years of reign. It's the essence of his politics. He, in Russian media, is stating that they're leading the biggest war since the Second World War, the war for survival. That's their rhetoric. They are digging trenches around Crimea. They are putting anti-tank measures, and he's visiting that peninsula, visiting the School of Arts, not even talking about fresh water, bridge, evacuation, possibility or certainty of retaining Crimea, that you guys are safe, that everybody will be defending it. Instead of that, Russian television is talking about Constantinople, about possibly taking Constantinople, about sending missiles to the capital of the country. By the way, sending missiles to where Putin is arrested. And in the meantime, they are digging trenches. They have built a regional group, rather strong one, in Crimea. There are different numbers. What's the number is? Mark, we heard several dozen thousand, 20, 30,000, basically. And they're not being thrown under Bakhmut or Vuhledar, where they really need it. These guys are set in Crimea defending it. So people are already coming to do a surgery and take out your crown jewel, and you're not even pretending that you will resist. And to explain to people who live there in Crimea that it will stay with Russia regardless. So my scenario, what I predict, and I think they're reading that in Kremlin as well, they see where we're going to. We are, together with West, leading the situation to the point when the Ukrainian army is at the top of Crimea and starts actively shoot at Russian targets, military targets in Crimea. Of course, we'll try to avoid civilian casualties, but when strategic ammo dumps and ships start sinking and everything starts exploding around, and something may happen to Crimean Bridge, it probably will not increase the morale of civilians, and the population of Crimea will likely try to flee. And at that moment, our criminal, Vladimir Putin, will either have to raise stakes or to leave Crimea, because he will have no other options. And raising stakes, we understand what it is, right? Yeah, nuclear weapons. Because every other options are excluded. So he has two options, to escalate or de-escalate. And where's the scary rhetoric about using nukes? We haven't heard that. We used that to hear that earlier, about 2 months ago, that we will be using all measures and defend Russian territory, and Russian propaganda was running ahead on the white horse screaming about it. Where is that? Where did that go? And how can you also promote your nuclear response when your closest possible, not even ally, but somewhat supporter, Xi Jinping, already told you bluntly, no nukes? And at the same time, NATO comes out and says, well, Crimea, that's your ex-Ukrainian territory. You guys can do whatever you want there. If you remember, the first months of war, they were avoiding talking about Crimea at all. So that means that they made a decision, they understand what will happen, and they know that fork, and they know the probable outcome of that fork for Russia. There are only two options out of this fork. One is using nukes, at the end of which Vladimir Putin loses his head and his whole elite dies and Russian military is no more. Second, is Russian elites, when they understand that that fork is approaching, they may just take Putin and give it to Hague Tribunal. Or third, when Putin just withdraws from Crimea and says, well, we didn't really want to hold it. The main thing is that Russian territory stays intact, and Crimea, we didn't promise you anything, right? Right, okay. Yeah, we are fighting NATO, we'll be back. China is holding us, we cannot do active action there. We'll be back at some point. And that's it. Yeah, we'll have to do another stream that says I'll be back to Crimea. So nobody analyzed his visit much. Everybody was concentrated on the order. But I would say, to the contrary, that the lack of proper rhetoric about Crimea at the anniversary of that so-called acquisition, in reality an annexation, the lack of any rhetoric, that's an important point. And very stupid in relation to the PR, that visit to open an art school in Crimea. And absolutely pointless. Just like in the movie, yeah, such a shame Ostap hasn't felt for a long time. And Mark, I've been to a few meetings where the decisions are being made on the presidential level, right? A couple dozen, right? So I know how these decisions are made. I put myself into these meetings, and in order for the mountain to birth a mouse, out of all that to be what? Let's send Putin to visit kindergarten or School of Arts. What needs to be done to Zelensky that in order, for example, to celebrate anniversary of returning the Crimea back, to send him to open kindergarten, instead of visiting and making statements about here we having open ports, economy is growing, people are moving back in, turning to big public gatherings. Right, to celebrate the Independence Day by going to some podunk nowhere to open an art school. I don't know what's happening with their protocol service to make a decision to pick that activity. This is a very weird decision to make. And I think it was maybe somewhere on the list and they were picking from several options, but still, the fact that it's on the list, this is a deterioration. This is a deterioration of that professional service. Okay, to hell with the School of Arts. Where is the official statement? 9th anniversary, big war happening. No official statement. Yep. You know why? You know, Mark, why? Because C is visiting. And C's already stated that Crimea is an integral part of Ukraine. So they didn't want to upset Xi Jinping's visit. Now, let's talk about meeting him. Do you think Putin will go to the airport to meet him? 100%. And what about protocol? Yeah, no, he shouldn't. He should be waiting for him in Kremlin. So you think? I think he will visit. I think he'll visit Olexiy. We'll see, but in any case, it'll be like calling the dog the lap dog. Puppy, come here. And you know what puppies do when they come to your leg? Yeah, they can be that. Anyway, it's interesting to see what will unfold. Maybe after listening to us, they'll find something else. I'll be curious to see how Xi Jinping will react to that. Imagine Putin dresses up as stewardess. Yeah, that's funny. So if Russia was afraid to congratulate the citizens of Crimea for the anniversary, it'll be really interesting to see what will happen during Xi Jinping's visit, because that was just on the eve of it. So, Olexiy, why am I saying that he probably will go to airport? Because remember when he visited Moscow, it was not that airport table that Putin is usually meeting people at. It was a very cozy little one. There was no pandemic scares or anything. He was sitting almost at each other's lap, and there was a guy visiting from China, right? So potentially he could have been contagious, but they were sitting at a very small table, and they were basically hugging each other. And then right after, I was actually making a point to see how did he meet the president of Azerbaijan. They were back at a proper distance of 10 yards. You know, another interesting point, about that same time of year, there was a meeting of Mao Zedong with Stalin. And the intrigue was that Stalin was trying to portray an older brother, and Mao Zedong despised Stalin, and he considered USSR to be responsible for a lot of humiliations of China. And he also considered China to be a more ancient civilization, of course, and to be more proper communist. But everything was arranged so that indeed Stalin did look like an older brother in that meeting. So Mao just had to eat it up. But 70 years later, Vladimir the Terrible, the Tsar of Russia, will be now doing the secondary role in that meeting. That's the goal, the pinnacle of his politics. He drained down the toilet everything that Russian Empire was capturing for centuries. He just flushed that. Oh, you know, the average Russian doesn't even understand that. Mark, we're here for those to help them understand that. Those who are listening to us, Olexiy, they somewhat do, but most of them do. But there are a lot of those who don't. And they're not even getting that Putin is now a vassal duchy of China. They're somewhere next to Uyghurs. Well, you know, like Saltykov-Shchedrin, a Russian classic, said that the peasant was getting wiser not with his mental acuity, but with the punished butt, via the punished butt. So we have, I think we're at a time, we have 350,000 watching us, over 150,000 click the like button. Thank you, guys. Right after that stream, I'll have a separate stream about PSYOP against Feygin on my other channel, Feygin Shorts. You got a PSYOP against you? What's happening, Mark? Oh yeah, there's been things happening for about a week already. Kremlin started another campaign against me. I talked about it briefly. They at first were jumping on you, but it's kind of pointless. They made a few dents, and then the moment they crawled off, the dents got back and pushed out. And on me, I think they're attacking me as well. Their goal is to somewhat bring down the popularity of channel before the major events unfolding in Ukraine. Remember, they attacked you at first, showing that you're presumably a gay actor in Moscow. They did that fake video. Then there was another one with a newspaper where they promoted you in the Ukrainian military as you're not even for Ukraine, right? Yeah, there was that. And then there were a ton of other waves trying to attack you for whatever you say wrong during the stream. But you don't really take it hard. So at some point they decided, I guess, in parallel to all that shit flying, they decided to attack the channel itself. And the way they're doing it, they took their own low-level KGB agent who recorded a video, which was, they did their best to make it as public as possible, but we're keeping the track of all people who are mentioned and related to that stream, and actually showed a stream where one of the authors of that stream, so-called Vasilyeva, where he is communicating with her KGB handler, or FSB handler. Oh yeah, the lady who was the head of the Committee of Mothers in Ukraine. Yeah, the one who was also planting bugs in your administration. She actually tried to reach me as well, but failed. Oh yeah, she was very active, because her handler from FSB told her to go. And she's a pretty big lady, so yeah, I don't know if she wanted to rent herself to different Ukrainian politicians. But so what are they attacking you, accusing you, Markov? Really no facts. They're just saying that I'm a horrible man, that we're not helping the front, and the channel is supporting sometimes anti-Ukrainian narratives. I'm a bad attorney, the standard set, right? And everything usually breaks at the lack of facts, because there is nothing else they can bring up to the table. 300,000 live with us. And that's the result of their effort. Or lack thereof. Anyway, continue watching us. Thank you, guys. Good luck with stream, Mark, and see you on Monday. Kostya, Mark, dear viewers.